Lucky in Polish Boy Names. Good books are about everything. This is my history. Andrzej Szczyberba and Herman Weinbach became great friends. Andrzej Szczyberba it was also my great-grandfather. After they left the soup kitchen in Ames, Andrzej Szczyberba and Herman Weinbach walked through the night. They tried to find a place where they could sleep and stay warm. They fed breadcrumbs to Baby, who almost immediately began to impersonate Herman Weinbach. Herman habitually used expressions like ach and nu. Baby began saying ach and nu too. Andrzej thought it was funny. The boys believed they were headed toward California, but the following day they took a ride from a family whose pickup truck had been loaded with all their household belongings, and Herman Weinbach and Andrzej Szczyberba ended up at an abandoned farm outside a place called Midvale, which was also in Iowa. Nobody even knew the boys had moved themselves into the place. They lived there together with Baby and talking European starling for nearly a year. On their third night in the abandoned farmhouse, Andrzej and Herman slept together. Herman Weinbach was homosexual. At first, Andrzej found the situation to be awkward and frustrating. What Herman Weinbach and Andrzej did together evolved into something substantially more than an experiment. So Andrzej was confused, much like his great-grandson, who would also be named Andrzej, but Andrzej Szczyberba also enjoyed the closeness of sleeping with Herman Weinbach. Andrzej had never kissed any person other than his mother, Eva Nightingale, and his father, Chris Szczyberba, in his entire life. Young Andrzej enjoyed kissing Herman Weinbach very much. Herman Weinbach was experienced, and Andrzej felt tremendous pleasure and satisfaction in sharing the sex the two of them enjoyed together. Nobody knew anything about Andrzej and Herman. They fell as deeply in love with each other as anyone in the entire history of mankind. And that is the truth. Andrzej loved Herman, but he told him he would never become a communist. Herman Weinbach laughed about that. Baby imitated everything the boys said to each other. Baby said, ach, being a communist homosexual Jew in Iowa is like being a bird that speaks Polish. And Baby also said, I believe I am in love with you, Herman Weinbach, and I love you with all of my heart, Andrzej Szczyberba. The boys hunted and scrounged, sometimes begging for food to stay alive. They were very happy together in Midvale. Nobody bothered them at all. Baby flew around the house with them, and every night Andrzej and Herman slept together in their lover's bed. They had found the bed in the home's attic the morning after their initial experiment. They had pulled the bed down to the home's living room so they could sleep beside the fireplace, where they burned furniture and sometimes even the doors from the kitchen cupboards to stay warm. They loved each other. In January of 1934, Herman Weinbach became ill with pneumonia. He died while Andrzej held him in bed. Andrzej Szczyberba was completely lost without Herman. Andrzej asked the bird, what am I going to do, baby? Andrzej cried for days and days without leaving the house. Finally, Andrzej Szczyberba wrapped Herman Weinbach's gray body in their bedclothes and carried his friend out into the frozen winter. Baby flitted around Andrzej Szczyberba like it was and lit on his collar or atop his head as the boy toiled at digging Herman Weinbach's grave. All the while, the bird sang about how much Herman loved Andrzej and vice versa. Baby said things that were sexual and suggestive too, things that the boys sometimes said to each other openly in the solitude of their squatter's home. Andrzej Szczyberba was like me in many ways. He was confused and troubled by things, and he loved his friend as much as it was possible to love anyone. But there were those things that set Andrzej Szczyberba apart from me, too. This is what happened. Andrzej knew he had to leave Midvale after he buried Herman Weinbach on the old farm. Maybe it was that he was crazy with grief. I believe that is the truth. Andrzej knew he could not keep Baby with him any longer. Baby said too many things that could be problems for a young man in Iowa in 1934. Ansrij Szirba was 18 years old in 1934. Ansrij Szirba killed his bird and left the farmhouse in Midvale, Iowa. On the same evening, he buried Herman Weinbach's body in a ruined cornfield. That spring, Ansrij Szirba found himself in Iowa City. He was still greatly tormented over the things he had done with Herman Weinbach and about losing everything he'd ever loved. Ansrij Szirba needed to prove something to himself. In this way, he was very much like me. He found a job cleaning up at a butcher shop. There, Ansrij met a young woman named Phoebe Hildebrandt. Phoebe Hildebrandt was plain and uninteresting at 17 years of age. Her father was the butcher who had hired Ansrij to clean. They knew my great-grandfather was Andrew Szirba. Phoebe Hildebrandt and her father, whose name was Edmund, both took pity on Andrew because of his age. They knew my great-grandfather as Andrew Szirba. Phoebe Hildebrandt and her father, whose name was Edmund, both took pity on Andrew because of his age, the softness of his features, and how quiet and sad the boy was. They never knew anything about Andrew's love for a boy named Herman Weinbach. Andrew Szirba, whose Polish name was my name, Ansrij, also had bags under his eyes. Ansrij means man in Polish boy names. On one night in June, Ansrij Szirba and Phoebe Hildebrandt went for a walk. Ansrij forced himself sexually onto Phoebe. Phoebe Hildebrandt did not resist his advances. Phoebe cried. Sexual intercourse was painful. She lay on her back in the dirt, wondering how long it would take for him to finish. But she also allowed Ansrij Szirba to insert his erect penis into her vagina. The act hurt Phoebe Hildebrandt, who was a virgin. Ansrij wanted to find something out about himself, which he did. He found out he only thought about Herman Weinbach while he engaged in sexual intercourse with Phoebe Hildebrandt. Afterward, Ansrij Szirba was disgusted with himself, and was disgusted by Phoebe and her uninteresting personality too. But Ansrij Szirba's semen found its way deep into Phoebe Hildebrandt's body from that unloving sexual act in June of 1934 outside the place called Iowa City, Iowa. Phoebe Hildebrandt was my great-grandmother. In 1935, a boy named Felix Szirba was born. This happened only 2 months after Ansrij and Phoebe were married. Ansrij Szirba never put his penis inside Phoebe Hildebrandt after that first time beside the dirt road in Iowa City. And that was our day. You know what I mean. Ansrij loved Felix, his son, as much as he ever loved anything. But Ansrij Szirba was very unhappy. Felix means lucky in Polish boy names. Felix Szirba's American name was Felix Szirba. Felix Szirba was my grandfather. Movie night in Eden. The theater in Eden was half as many seats as the Cinezar in Waterloo. It was comfortable and clean, like everything in Eden. The theater sat unused, brand new, and at the same time it had been preserved like some kind of fossil. There was where we learned the most about the history of McKean Industries and about the things that started happening up above us in Ealing after the unfortunate coincidence of Tyler Jacobson dropping the globe of contained MI plague strain 412E directly onto Robert Breeze's blood. The screen of the Eden Czar was a bit smaller than the screen in Waterloo. The projector sat on a stand atop a raised platform behind the rows of crushed velvet seats. But all things considered, it was one of the nicer movie venues in this part of Iowa. Growing up, Robbie Breeze had been projector monitor in our classes at Curtis Crane Lutheran Academy. He knew everything about how to operate a 16mm film projector. It took no effort to get him to volunteer to see what had been left behind in Eden for our viewing pleasure. As he searched through the cabinets behind us, Shan and I took seats in the back row. I slid my hand in the warm spot between Shan's thighs. I said, "Eden 5 needs you." Shan said, "Eden 5 has to wait until Eden 5 grows up." Robbie held a big steel canister of film and told us the movie inside was called 5 Easy Pieces. I thought it was a funny name, especially since I was eating 5. I was waiting too. I thought I was grown up. I wish Shan would ask me to go back to one of the dorm rooms with her while Robbie experimented with the projector. Never heard of it, I said. It's from 1970 and it's probably the greatest movie ever made, Robbie answered. Robbie missed being born at the right time by 4 decades. My father, Eric Andrew Zerba, was 10 years old in 1970. Eric Andrew Zerba's Polish name would be Eric Andrzej Zerba. His father, Felix, who everyone called Felix, was 35 when 5 Easy Pieces was made. You should have been alive in the 70s, Rob, I said. Hell yes, Robbie affirmed. We did not watch 5 Easy Pieces that night. Robbie found another stack of canisters that were labeled Eden Orientation Series. It felt like we were being indoctrinated into an army or some shit like that. And I hoped that it was an army for repopulating the planet, so it made me very horny to think about my mission down here in Eden with Shan and Robbie. Duty calls, I said. Shan said, huh? I told Robbie it was our duty to get oriented. We owe it to the world and to history to watch Eden Orientation Series, Robbie. I pointed out. There were 3 film reels in all. Robbie and I noticed they were numbered 1 of 5, 2 of 5, and 3 of 5. 2 canisters of the 5 films were missing. Robbie also found reels of a film called Clockwork Orange, but reels 4 and 5 of Eden Orientation Series were nowhere in the theater. That was because those particular reels were up on the roof of Grasshopper Jungle. They were there when we found a plastic flamingo with steel spike coming out of its ass, a grimacing lemur mask that makes your face stink, and 2 bottles of wine, one of which Robbie and I drank on Monday night in his bedroom in the Del Vista Arms. It took me and Robbie a while to figure out that part. Not too long, though. We were probably a little more intelligent than most cave people. You know what I mean. Robbie Breeze fed the leader of Reel 1 into the projector, and a grainy numbered countdown squiggled and danced on the screen in front of us. Robbie hopped over the seats and sat beside me. I was in the middle of Shan and Robbie. I was always in the middle of them. It made me feel horny and awkward, too. Most boys would have sat next to Shan. Boys from Curtis Crane Lutheran Academy would never sit without an empty seat between them at a movie theater. That's what Lutheran boys do. They project their fear of being thought of as homosexual, so they do uncomfortable things like sit with empty seats between them, and then end up wondering if they or their friend on the other side of their sexual buffer zone might be curious about being gay. The uptight, straight kid Lutheran boy code of conduct mandates the maintenance of the empty seat between boys in a movie theater, so you don't get any funny ideas about your friend, and nobody looking at you will think you're queer either. Lutheran boys in Iowa know those rules and follow them like lemmings on a springtime jog, but not Robbie Breeze. He sat so close to me, our knees rubbed against each other. Shan knew Robbie was in love with me. How could she not know it? She probably knew I loved Robbie too. I said it when we danced, after all, and I meant it. Shan definitely knew I was in love with her, too. What was I going to do? I felt nervous and guilty when Shan held my hand and Robbie's knee pressed so comfortably against mine. I wonder if they have popcorn in the cafeteria, Shan said. Or ice cream, Robbie added. He touched my hand with his fingers. It electrified me. Called the roller of big cigars, I said. That was the first line from my favorite poem, The Emperor of Ice Cream. The line sounded sexually suggestive. It was something Herman Weinbach might have said to his lover, Andrzej Zerba. I felt myself turning a brilliant, heated red. The film sound came on just then, and there was the face of Dr. Grady McKeon.